Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine. Today I want to share with you some math and grammar workbooks. These are by the company Straightforward, and there's a math series and also a grammar and language series, and there actually may be more, but these are the ones that I have. Now this is kind of an old workbook series. I believe they're from the 1980s, and actually it's gonna say when these ones were published now, but I believe that these are kind of like an older workbook series. And what I like about them is that they are, as their name suggests, straightforward. And what I like for my math workbooks is for something that is for basic arithmetic, that is straightforward, that can provide a lot of opportunities for practice, and that is focused. So I'm going to share with you the books that I have here, how I found them, why I chose them, and how we're liking them so far. Now, I also want to say that I also have another video that showcases the other workbooks that we use, which are the Key to Curriculum series. So there's Key to Fractions, Key to Decimals, Key to Geometry, Key to Algebra, Key to Measurement. So all of those Key to series, that's the other workbook that we use in our homeschool, but pretty much we don't use anything else. Now, these are intended to work with a curriculum, in my opinion, and so we will be using these to support an existing curriculum, but I have to say that these, as well as the Key to Curriculum series, are so well done. In my opinion, I feel like they could replace a curriculum with additional supplements to it. So in a way, sometimes that's how we use it, even though we have an existing curriculum. I find this to be the bulk of our written work, and our worksheet work comes from these workbooks as well as the Key to Curriculum series. This series, this Straightforward series, is actually kind of newer for me. We've been using the Key to series for many years, and I'm just happy to have something different to support our math studies and our language art studies. All right, so we've got fractions and decimals, pre-algebra and algebra, trigonometry, pre-geometry, another one for pre-geometry, and a couple for pre-algebra. So, and then I also have the one for grammar and diagramming sentences, which I love to do. I want to start out with the pre-algebra book 1. This is the first one that we had. And I also want to say that in our homeschool, we will have our main lesson, or our main focus for math. But in addition to that, I'll have a lot of workbooks that are several grades below where my student is at. And I will pull worksheets from those workbooks as daily math, and I'll just collect them all and put them in a binder. I might tear them out of like all these multiple workbooks and then put them in a binder, and then have that be what they add to their daily work as review work. And that's how I came upon this book, Pre-Algebra Book 1 from Straightforward Math Series. And I think this is the one where you can actually see the copyright date, 1989. So this is an older series, but what I like about them is that they are super focused, really basic, and they are straightforward. So in our homeschool, we'll have our main lesson, or whatever math focus we're having for that particular year. In addition to that, I like to have review work for my students. I like it to be independent work, and you can kind of imagine it as busy work where the students can do it on their own. It takes some time so that you can focus on maybe another student, or prepare a lesson, or just have a break in between all of the teaching that you're doing throughout the day. And so having some workbooks that are a couple of grades below grade level means that they can do that work on their own. It's great review work, and it usually doesn't take a lot of time. That's how I ended up with this book. And also, I want to say that I ended up with the Pre-Algebra book years and years before we actually used it. By the time we actually used it, I was blown away at how much I liked the approach, how simple it was, how well my son did, how much it filled in gaps that I didn't even know he had. I didn't even know there were gaps in his math until he had done a workbook that was so different than the things that we had been previously doing in our homeschool. So I'll teach from a particular set of lessons, we'll have our workbooks that we're used to having, but bringing in something new means that you're looking at it from a different approach. Maybe you're getting questions that are worded in a different way. Maybe you're getting word problems that are different, although I don't think there are word problems in this series. So what I liked about it was that it gave us an opportunity to fill in gaps that we didn't even know we have, to review work, to master concepts that we thought we had already understood pretty well. So that was the Pre-Algebra Book 1. Once he did it and he liked it, I went and I got all of these ones. So you can find out where you can find these, the retailers, the publisher, all in the description box below. There's a link that will take you to my website. I have a blog post that accompanies this video. It's going to have more details on the resources that I'm using and where you can find them, because it took me a little while to find it, only because this is a really old workbook and it took me a little while to track down where I could find them again. So before I show you the grammar one, I want to take you to Algebra or Pre-Algebra Book 2. And this is going to take you through some basic concepts that are going to help you with algebra. But this pre-algebra isn't going to help you master your 4 math operations and understand them with fractions and decimals and percents, which actually that's a little bit of a departure from algebra. But this book assumes that you've already been able to do those. So it's going to focus on other things. So it just wants to make sure that you can do your positive and negative numbers and some basic algebra concepts, but it's still going to be something that's going to prime you for taking on algebra. So you've got Pre-Algebra Book 1 and 2. There's also the Algebra series. So we have, there's also the Pre-Algebra Companion. I forgot about that. So that's going to take you through some other concepts that are going to help you with algebra. There is quite a bit more writing and explanation for this particular workbook, and I find that what I like about this is that generally my student can, because this is something that is either a review or it's below grade level, he can work through the examples and the explanations on his own, and only on certain occasions does he actually need my help. For the most part, he's been able to do all of these things on his own. There are some algebra concepts that he does need a bit more explanation with. For the most part, he's been able to do this independently. So in order to do something independently, in my opinion, it needs to be something that's below grade level, or you have a really bright child or student who really can understand the concepts without a lot of extra explanation. You also have students who are just prone to having an intuition about math, and they generally don't even look at the examples and the explanations. They just dive into the work and they just know how to do it. Students come in all different capabilities and modalities, and so knowing how your student will respond best to a set of workbooks is important, because you may need to sit there and literally read the paragraph to your student, because he'll need that auditory explanation in addition to the written content. And it doesn't mean that he's not capable of doing the work. It just means that he needs an additional layer of instruction that's different from another child who maybe needs no instruction at all, or another child who can just read the instructions on his or her own and then do the work. So then we have the Algebra Book, and this first book has I feel it's the basic algebra, but it's not as rigorous as what you might expect to find in a high school course on algebra. So I find this to be a really great offer for a 7th or 8th grader, so junior high, maybe 12, 13 years old, or as a gentle approach to algebra for a 9th or 10th grader, or as a supplement to a rigorous algebra course. That's just my assessment and opinion about the content and the level of the work. So let me take you to, let's do decimals and fractions. So this is advanced decimals and advanced fractions. And what I like about this is that this is just as if you had on your own gone in and done a bunch of examples or your own worksheets to practice decimals and fractions, and then it's just available for you and ready for you in a workbook form. This is the kind of stuff that I love to include in our homeschool, because you may have learned how to do this and then moved on to other mathematical concepts and then forgotten how to do this. And all you need is just a really brief refresher course. At least that's what I have noticed with my children, is that they just need a very minimal reminding of how to do something like long division with decimals, for instance, and then they can just pick it up and go with it. And I like that there are a lot of questions per page. There isn't a lot of other information or other review work, or it's a combination of, say, like a multiple choice and a fill in the blank and a word problem. It's just super straightforward. It's just, here's the concept. Let's practice this until you've mastered it, and then we can move on to another concept. Now, if you're finding that the number of questions is going to exhaust your child and add to his academic fatigue, then definitely you could just do, like, say, one column a day or one row a day, in addition to whatever you're already doing, just so that you've got something going on a daily basis that can't take more than about 10 minutes, just to keep these skills sharpened. And it's okay if your child forgets and you have to revisit it later. Every time you revisit after they have forgotten, generally it takes less time to recall that information. Usually it's easier to do it after a period of time has passed. Usually it's easier to revisit it in, say, the beginning of the year, after you've had several months of the summer to kind of forget it, and you're like, oh no, he's forgotten all this stuff and we're starting the new year, and what are we going to do? You're going to find that recalling the information takes less time than teaching it the first time. And it might not be as enjoyable. I know sometimes we'll teach something that's new for the first time and there's that excitement that goes along with it. And then there is that low point where you're trying to work on it until you have become proficient in it, and that can be the part that's a little bit tedious. Then you get over the hump and you get to a part where you master it and it becomes enjoyable again, and then you go down because you've forgotten it, so you go down into this other rut where you're like, oh, I forgot how to do that. Then you bring that information back up and through remembering or recalling or a short review lesson, and then you kind of bounce back up and it becomes enjoyable again, because you can now achieve the positive results, the success, easier, and it's just more enjoyable because it's not as challenging as it was the first time around. That's the cycle that I observe in our own homeschool, but you as a parent or teacher will know best how to approach your own students. Advanced fractions is going to be similar to advanced decimals. I think the only thing that, and probably for a child is not even a problem, the font is quite small, but in that way you're not crowding the page with a lot of extra blank space. You're really maximizing the amount of work that you're going to get on one page. But I do know, for at least for my children, they write a little bit big. If there's any space that they're going to need to do work on it, you might want to be mindful of that. I don't think there's going to be for this particular part right here, because all the denominators are the same. But if there's other places where you're going to find that your child needs more work and they write really big, then you may want to add an additional sheet of paper, just so that it doesn't get too messy and complicated. They make mistakes just because there wasn't enough space. So that's the only thing that you might want to be mindful of when you're doing something like this and you need more workspace. But you can see that there's just questions the whole page. It's just the same types of questions over and over again, so that you can really master that particular concept. Let's move on to, we have pre-geometry and we have trigonometry. Let's do the pre-geometry. So we have done geometry in our homeschool using the Key to Geometry series, and that's really different than this geometry approach. For the most part, and there could be times in our geometry workbooks that we use by Key to Geometry that actually have a lot more math, but by that I mean a lot more computational math. But for the most part, the Key to Geometry series that we use, and also our Waldorf approach to geometry in grade 5 and again in grade 6, and honestly I use it all the way through 7th and 8th grade, tends to be more about creating shapes and seeing those shapes in nature or in different cultures around the world, and really finding reverence and beauty in what geometry is about, and less about finding the measurement of a particular angle and doing geometry theorems and proofs and comparison of angles. It's less about that in the geometry that we do. But in this, you're going to see a lot more of what I'm going to call traditional geometry. That's just the way that I'm going to look at the two different kinds of approaches for geometry. One where it's more about artistry and reverence and beauty, and there is actually a lot of math in the geometry that we do through the Waldorf approach. There's a lot of understanding how the math came about, how trigonometry came about by examining the circle and the shapes within a circle and the divisions of a circle. So I don't want to say that there isn't a lot of math, but it's a process. Here, you're looking at what you're gonna, in my opinion, typically find in a geometry curriculum, and this is going to help support and supplement those concepts. So you have pre-geometry book 1, and then you have pre-geometry book 2, and this is just going to go over what the basics of geometry, understanding shapes, understanding area and volume, understanding angles, understanding how these shapes are constructed, and that's what you're going to find from the pre-geometry. Trigonometry, this is our first look at this particular workbook, and this is not, well, actually we did do sine and cosine and those concepts a little bit in our geometry in grade 5 and 6. However, as a workbook, as going through a lot of math computations and problems, we have not gone into that. So this book is going to be that for my son. So because this is going to be new information, in my opinion, this is going to take more work on my part to help explain these concepts and to use this particular workbook a little bit more like a curriculum rather than a supplement. And the last book I want to show you is the Grammar and Diagramming Sentences workbook. Now, there are other workbooks for the straightforward series that have to do with language arts, but this is the only one that we wanted to use. And I have somewhat mixed feelings about it. Now, I don't use a lot of grammar and language arts workbooks to supplement our existing curriculum. I will use them as our 5 to 10 minute daily review, and we will find, and I haven't done this in a while just because we've run out, but I will find old workbooks below grade level. I'll add them into a binder, and then my child can just go through and do them on his or her own. I also have a video on how I put that together. You can find that link down in the description box below so that you can get a visual of what this looks like by taking these old workbooks and just adding them to a binder. I love sentence diagramming, and I could just do that all the time. However, my favorite resource for sentence diagramming happens to be by Susan Weiss Bauer, and it is from First Language Lessons, and there's another, Writing with Ease. There's a whole series, and I actually have, I think, misnamed the one that has the sentence diagramming, but of course you can check out the description box below and find the link to her products, because I really like her approach for language arts. It's very simple. It's not tricky. I hate so much when workbooks and curricula are tricky for children. When they're first learning a concept, I want it to be very clear what they're learning, and I really don't like trickery in workbooks and in curricula to test them to see if they really understand it. I prefer to avoid that altogether. So I want something that's going to be simple and straightforward and allow children to easily become proficient and eventually master a concept. And then once they've really internalize that over the course of years, then you can kind of bring in, more trickier aspects of it. You can definitely bring in the exceptions to the rules. Early on, you absolutely can do that, in my opinion, but bringing in tricky questions where it's difficult to understand between the two answers because there's an element of being right in both of them. I really don't like that. Anyway, this workbook is a lot more dense than I expected, and I'm not sure how this is going to work for my son, but I do like the workbooks on diagramming, sentence diagramming, although this is one where you're definitely going to need an extra sheet of paper to do all of the work. in my opinion, because there's not going to be work in here. I do prefer the workbooks, even though they're really thick and they seem like they're wasting a lot of space, but that includes the sentence and then the diagram that's already formed, and then you fill in where each of the words go. I prefer those. But anyway, this is another one that we got to add to our daily work. Although, to be honest, we have been able to incorporate the math workbooks a lot easier than this one so far. And that tells me something, that either this is going to take years and years before we incorporate it and it'll finally be for my final child who's homeschooling, or it just didn't suit our needs very well. But so far, the math books are working beautifully. He's working through multiple workbooks at one time, and he'll just do a page in each of these as part of his daily work. It just keeps that information fresh, and it's super easy, just takes a few minutes every day, and so far it's working out really well. All right, if you'd like to see some of the main lesson blocks in which these workbooks are used for, you can tap on the screen right now. Don't forget to check out the blog post that accompanies this video. That link is down in the description box below. And if you want to see how our homeschool is progressing on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.